Welcome to the podcast of top executive coach Tony Mayo. This podcast is a recording of one of Tony's teleseminars. You can join future teleseminars at no charge by registering at tiny.cc/Mayo-call. That URL is tiny.cc/MAYOCALL.
Five of us on the call, and I'll include other people as they come in. Our format is I have a topic I'll talk about briefly, and then we'll listen to your thoughts about that, things you want to add to it, or maybe there's a situation, an opportunity, decision that we can see this might apply. And then we'll take a moment to do a centering exercise. I want to do that later in the call so that people are less likely to be ringing in and coming into the middle of that quieter part of it. And we'll finish up with whatever's on people's mind. We'll have a free-flowing conversation and finish up at 6 o'clock. Does that sound right?
Good.
Okay.
That's great. Tony, this is Doris. I am going to have to sign off a bit before that, but I'll stay with you as long as I can.
Okay. Well, to try to break in and say goodbye when you're ready to go.
Thanks. Will do.
Okay. Well, the topic I had in mind for today is trust. It's one of those things that is fundamental. It's a lot of like air and water that once it's mentioned, everybody knows that it's important for the things that we want from our lives, but we don't often take time to examine it and think about what it consists of and how it operates. And of course, that's a popular kind of thing for coaching, is to take something that is so part of what we do that we don't even think about it, to get it up and put it on the work table and deal with it for a while. Trust is something that has been considered. I see it more and more in the literature. There was some good economic research about went along the lines of asking people in various European countries how much they would trust a person from a different European country in a business transaction. Just that, again, 3 or 4 different countries. Well, how much do you trust a person from Switzerland? How much do you trust a person from Bulgaria? Ask people in Germany the same question for other folks. And so they came up with this sort of hierarchy of how much, on average, people in one country trusted people from another country, just on the basis of where they're from. And they found a near perfect correlation between that level of trust and the amount of trade between those countries. Can't tell you which is cause and effect, but they certainly seem very closely linked. Another study I find interesting is that they interviewed employees about how much they trust their managers. And they found a very strong correlation between productivity and trust in the manager. Once again, it's not clear which is the cause and which is the effect. Maybe highly productive employees are more likely to trust their managers, or maybe it's trustworthy managers get more productivity. In any case, I think it probably pays to be trustworthy. And I'm pretty sure it pays to be trusting, too. But we're using this word as though we know what it means. And I found it very useful to lay out sort of the pieces of it, because trust is one of those words that is so commonly used that it begins to have multiple usages. And from the way I've listened to people, I've decided that trust has 4 components. Well, 5. And if those of you who are visually oriented, you could see a blog post I have on this. A shortcut to that blog post is at a URL, which is tiny.cc/2 trust. So it's tiny.cc/2 TRUST. So when we say that we trust someone, there are 5 things that we're talking about. We don't always mean all 5, which is what leads to some of the confusion. The first part of trust is sincerity. And that is essentially, I believe that what the person is saying matches what they're thinking. They're not promising to do something out loud when internally they know they're actually not going to do it. Or they're not giving us a piece of information that they know is incorrect. You know, to say we trust someone, we often mean that we think they're being sincere in what they say. Make sense? That match your usage of the word trust?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Another one, this particularly arises in the work environment, is capacity. And that is, does the person have the time, the funds, the influence, the resources that are necessary to follow through on what they promise? I mean, they may sincerely promise it, but can they actually do it? One of my favorite examples of this is I was working with a group of executives about making requests and following through in a reliable manner. And I had the CEO say, is there a request you're planning of making of your team that we could work with now? He said, actually, there is one. I'm getting ready to plan the holiday party. I need to ask every department head here how many people from their group is going to go to the party. And I said, well, by when do you need this? By when's an important word. Those people who work with me know that's a key phrase. He said, I need it by close of business tomorrow. Well, they went on the table. Everyone said yes. And then one of the people at the table, who was the most junior executive there, he was the head of IT. He had one employee and one contractor. He turned to the head of operations, who had 1,500 direct reports. And he said, Chuck, you can't keep that promise. We're all a little bit startled. He said, your employees work shifts, some of them just on the weekends. You can't possibly communicate with all of them by the close of business tomorrow. He said, that's true. I don't have the capacity to follow through on this. And he was appreciative the person gave him a chance to give a more trustworthy response. So they negotiated the deadline to sometime early the next week so he could get to all of his people and give a reliable answer. So there are people that we all know who habitually make commitments with sincerity that they really don't have the capacity to do. They're too busy, they don't have the skills, and so on. The skill is actually separate. That's the next one. Competence. Does the person have the training, the skill, the experience, and so on to get the job done? You know, when you say, I trust the person with this job, we generally mean that they have the competence to follow through with it. And this one can be a tough one to talk about in the workplace. Now, sincerity, that's pretty touchy. You don't want to call someone a liar, but people are pretty comfortable with the idea that folks sort of overpromise. They say what people want to hear. So sincerity, there's a gray area in the workplace. Competence, that's a hard thing for especially peers to talk about. I was doing an offsite with a group of mainly engineers. It just wasn't moving. I couldn't get this group to commit to anything, move forward, open up. And finally, what emerged is everybody at the table thought they were a better engineer than everyone else. And they were just not willing to rely on each other to get things done. So they had all these little fiefdoms. And as a whole, they couldn't market the sum of their skills because they didn't trust the competence of the other people at the table. And it was something that they found they couldn't talk about. They didn't feel safe to say, no, you're fine at doing this, but I wouldn't want you to write a seismographic study, or I'd trust you to write a study on seismography, but I would never have you choose the equipment to do the research. But once they could open up about the fact that everybody had a limited competence, and they wanted to be more open about what they could trust each other to do, then they could start cooperating. Boy, that was a hard one to get on the table. One that's more subtle than the first three is consistency. There are people who do a great job a lot of the time, but then they fall apart, or they get in some bind, or they get outside their range of abilities. It's just not reliable. And I worked with a fellow once he was the kind of guy that there were things that could happen to anybody, but they always seemed to happen to him. So he was always accident prone. Things were getting lost. The bizarre problem would happen on his project. He wasn't consistent. So there were certain things we couldn't trust him with because we just knew if something could go wrong, it would go wrong on his project. And the final aspect of trust that I don't hear many people talk about is care. And it's that, aspect of someone that you know they're going to take care of it, that they care about what's going to happen. It matters to them. This I see is important often in accounting and bookkeeping positions. When someone's business is looking to hire a bookkeeper, I often encourage them to look for what I call the bookkeeper mentality. A person who just can't go home until the checking account is reconciled. Not because it's important to the business, because it just doesn't feel right to them to leave it unbalanced. That extra element of care about the job because of what it means about who they are. That's the kind of person you can trust with certain kinds of tasks. Now, this could seem like a lot of words or hair splitting, but the way I put it into practice, I gave some hint of it in my work with executive teams. But for any person in an organization from day to day, if you're wondering why you can't rely on other people, or why people aren't giving you the assignments you'd like, it can be useful to go down this list and say, which of these 5 is missing? Yeah? Is it that I don't trust the sincerity of what they're saying? Am I concerned they don't have the capacity for it? Is this the kind of job where the person just has to be personally invested and have care, and I'm not getting that signal from them? So this is something that often comes up with entrepreneurs looking for funding, investors looking for that passion, that this thing must happen no matter what. Whether I get your investment or not, I'm going to make it happen. They trust people with their money for whom they've got that level of care for making it work. So that's my perhaps over-detailed version of how I analyze trust. Well, let's try to go on to the synthesis step by asking you what applications have occurred to you while I talk. Maybe it's an incident from your past or something you're working on right now.
Well, this is Lowell. Your timing is perfect. You must be reading my mind. I actually didn't think there was something like this to help me analyze what's going on with a client who I can't trust to follow through on, and he can't trust himself to follow through on what he agrees to do. And I'm looking at this. I'm not quite sure which of these, but I think I'm going to ask him.
Yeah, and as a coach, this is a great way to support someone, or as a manager, rather than just deciding you don't trust the person working around them. But let's do an investigation. What aspect of it is it breaking down on? Is he just lying to you? There are many people. Maybe sometimes you develop an intuition for this. Really, what they're saying is, what noise do I have to make to end this conversation? What is it going to have? What do I have to say so you'll just back off? That's a sincerity problem.
Mm-hmm.
Or some just can't say no, and their capacity gets blown out of the water.
Yeah, I'll let him choose one from column A.
Yeah.
Column A.
It's a nice joint exploration. You just come in with the 5 words and work down the list. And if it's too touchy to do it head on, talk to him about trust for the people that I assume the client's a he.
Mm-hmm.
The people he works with. Ask him how he can use these with the people he takes promises from. So, and maybe as he examines that, he gets comfortable with it, then you can start seeing himself a bit more.
Very good, Tony. Thank you. I'm actually looking at my own failure to trust what I say I'm going to do. Which of these I fit into?
That's interesting. I had never thought about applying it to oneself.
I think I care, but I'm not sure about these other ones. I could be guilty of any of the other 4.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people say they don't trust themselves to have certain foods in the house. That's probably a consistency failure, and that's it's natural. There's some pretty good evidence coming in from neuroscience that we have essentially a disciplined muscle in our brain. The more times we are disciplined and turn down a tempting treat or opportunity, we use up that muscle. By the end of the day, it's worn out. That may be one of the reasons that so many people's diets fall apart after 9 p.m. You just get tired of saying no all day. And at that point, it's like, hey, I'm going for it. It's a consistency problem. You can't trust yourself.
Got it.
What other thoughts do we have around trust? Did I miss something? You were expecting to hear about trust?
Actually, this is Ron. I actually hadn't heard it sort of decomposed in a lot of detail. And I think of myself as somebody who has a lot of trust in people in general. And after writing down the 5 things and thinking through and some examples, what I came out with was a blind trust. Sometimes not even knowing, not even literally thinking, do I think this person is sincere? Do they have the capacity, or are they competent? Going through all 3 things. Mm-hmm. I thought it could just be a feeling I have. It could be a way that I've been sort of programmed to deal with people in my background. It's a default way of being with people to give them the benefit of the doubt like that.
And do you do that? Is there an endless supply of that blind trust, or can people lose credibility with you?
Oh yeah. There's not an endless supply, but I think usually my first interaction, or out of the gate, or sitting at the table dealing with them, I'll start from trust. I guess if I go back and think it through, they have to. I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe they do hit one of those things. They're not consistent, or they act like they don't care, or I believe that after meeting with them that they might be incompetent. That maybe the trust goes away. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but my starting point was from trust.
Yeah, and I think that's a very effective strategy. I think you and I have talked about the famous study done by Axelrod, as a computer scientist, became more of a philosopher, and he was thinking about the game theory problem of the prisoner's dilemma. In brief, the idea is 2 people have been arrested for a crime. They're told that, each of them are told separately, that if you give us evidence on your partner, he'll get a long sentence, you'll get a short one. But if he gives evidence before you do, you'll get the long sentence, he'll get the short one. If you both give evidence on each other, you'll both get a moderate sentence. But if you both keep your mouth shut, you both walk out. So what do you do in that situation? It's a tough problem. It's one that doesn't have an optimal solution mathematically, like a lot of game theory things do. So what Axelrod did was hold a contest. He announced to people that they could write a computer program, and he would have these computer programs run the prisoner's dilemma against each other. I think it was 1,000 iterations in various pairings, and see which one ended up with the least number of years in prison. And he got some very complicated strategies. The programs could remember the names of the other programs, so when they interacted again, they could learn how that program was, sort of game each other's strategies. And so there are a lot of ways to go about playing this game. The game that had won, and it continued to win for years. There was one slight modification of it that ended up getting ahead of it after many years of trials. But the one that was a champion for a long time was called tit for tat. When it first encounters a program or strategy it hasn't seen before, it trusts. It keeps his mouth shut, hoping the other one will keep his mouth shut too, and they'll both get off scot-free. However, if that program defects in the technical terminology, it gives tit for tat a long sentence. The next time it encounters that particular program, it will defect against the other program. The third time they meet, it's back to a blank slate. We're even now, I'll trust you again. And that turned out to be the winning strategy. sounds a lot like yours, Ron. I'll go in trusting. You proved that it was a mistake to trust you. Next time I won't. After that, maybe I'll give another shot.
Yeah.
But some people, live life with a very different strategy. They distrust until proven otherwise. They're very slow to rely on people. That's a conservative strategy. You don't get damaged as much, but you lose out on a lot of the multiplicative opportunities that are available from trusting. Because after all, if you think about it, even briefly, the things that matter to you the most, to all of us the most, require the action and cooperation of other people. So getting good at cooperating with other people is the way to get almost everything we want out of life. So just continually protecting ourselves because someone might not be trustworthy, it's got to be a losing game.
There's a lot of talk of this line that Reagan is famous for, which is trust but verify. And I've seen executives, in effect, test their subordinates with a task, with a time of completion by when this will happen, and see whether it does. And then go back as a way to train the person to consider this seriously, and test them again. I don't know how well it works. It sounds like it might, because if you continue to practice to give the timely feedback, they may self-destruct, or they may form a habit whereby they do actually follow through.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on how you do it. And before we do that, we're at about our halfway point. So why don't we take a few moments to practice clearing our minds, centering a bit, and we'll pick up this thread of conversation. Is anyone not sitting at their desk? Is someone driving or moving around somewhere? Okay, good. Well, if you're sitting someplace where you can relax a bit, maybe even close your eyes. If you're wearing a headset, perfect. If not, you can continue to hold it to your ears. But I would just get yourself as much as possible into a position where you can let the floor support your feet without your legs working. The chair hold you up. Just relax in and really feel the weight of your body against the chair and your feet against the floor or the ground. Keeping your spine fairly straight. In fact, if you were to imagine that very tip of the top of your head, if there were a string there that sort of stretched you up, you just slightly dangled from that so your spine is nice and straight all the way down to your pelvis. You have a nice elongated, relaxed, upright posture so you can breathe in through your nose and almost visualize the air going all the way down your throat into your lungs, expanding your abdomen. Blow it out through your mouth. Just take a few breaths in that posture, in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you continue to breathe, sort of scan your body, starting with your feet, up through your ankles, looking for any muscle that might be tensed, straining, or working that doesn't need to be. That can relax. Just let your legs hang off your knees. The back is straight, abdomen relaxed, shoulders are back and down. The table or the lap is supporting your arms, so you don't need to use your arm or shoulder muscles. Examine the back of your neck, see if there are any muscles building to a headache that you can just sort of breathe into and let go. Relax your tongue. Unlock your jaw. Let your eyelids rest gently, no squeezing, just gravity, closing your eyes, relaxing your forehead. As you breathe deeply through your nose. And out the mouth. Anytime some thoughts come up, some ideas, just let them go by. If they're important, they'll come back at the appropriate time. Continually draw your attention back to the breath, how it feels coming in your nose, how it feels to expand your chest and your abdomen. Whatever sensations you're having now, attend to those without judgment. Nothing to correct, nothing to fix. In this moment, just accepting how you are, where you are. And count 3 more long, slow breaths for yourself. In and out. And whenever you're ready, you open your eyes. Get back to your eager, stressful, active postures. Anyone notice anything different about themselves now versus 5 minutes ago? Just 5 minutes lost, huh?
More clarity.
Clarity. Say a little more about that. Doris, could you elaborate on what clarity feels like to you?
Maybe she can't hear you.
Doris, do you hear me? I guess not. Maybe we lost her. So clear, my voice goes right through her. Todd, are you still with us?
I am.
Ron?
Yep.
Ron?
On mute.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what happened with Doris, but maybe she hit mute right after she made that comment. Yeah, I always include this. I think this is the key leadership skill of our era, because there are so many competing messages and uses of our time and attention that taking time each day to train ourselves to choose to be aware of what's in front of us right now is so powerful. Something I'm extending it to recently is when I notice that I've got a lot of things going, a lot of tasks, feeling a bit of time pressure, to actually choose a task, not even choose a task, whatever task I'm on, stick with it to completion, no matter what. It's such a different experience of the day to take one thing, do it thoroughly, put it away, go to the next thing, put it away. It's not the way I operate automatically. But boy, it's such a focusing of energy that I'm less likely to get exhausted, and I feel like I've accomplished something instead of feeling like I was just busy. Anyone else can relate to that?
Oh, yeah. I once worked with someone who kind of frustrated me because he made sure that he wrote down exactly what he needed to write down to be complete about what was just said. And I stood there kind of impatiently, as I normally would, until he finished. And then we moved on. And after he did enough of that, I realized, I really need to do that.
And how trustworthy was he?
Very.
Probably no coincidence.
You think? You're right. It's interesting to be so frenetic, to not have the patience to just get the full benefit out of what just happened, instead of jumping quickly to the next thing and not fully completing the last thing. Really.
And I see people who use that busyness, that freneticness, to use your word, as a shield against assignments. How dare you give me something to do? Obviously, I'm very busy. And they're so busy they can't take good notes on it or listen to you thoroughly. So why would you bother giving them a task? You can tell it isn't going to get done. But they're busy. Can't get rid of them. They're essential. Have their fingers in a lot of things. Don't give me one more.
I think my guess is it's a totally unconscious practice that they're engaged in.
Well, I think it's unconscious in the sense that it's if you get someone to really take a look at it, it would probably dissipate pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. If you did what you talked about in the beginning here, which is actually take a moment to be present to what's happening in this moment.
Yeah. I think someone's using their phone to open a bottle.
All right.
I want to get back a little to what you're saying about sometimes bosses will test someone's trustworthiness, give them a certain assignment, observe it in a particular way. This is one of those things that the way of being, the attitude behind it, the intention is crucial. So many people will set up gotchas.
Before you take that path, Tony,
I
see where you're going, but I know in this particular case it wasn't that. It was how much more do I need to apply to be able to count on this guy? Yeah,
and I was going to say, and you can do it. And you can do it that way too. How do I get the best from this person? How can I structure things in a way that works for them?
Yeah.
And this is something as a consultant and a coach you probably look out for. One of the things you ask people early on is, how do they like to be communicated with? Is this a person who reads their emails thoroughly? Is this a person who has to be face-to-face? We want to find a way that'll be successful with their style. And sometimes you can do that by testing things out.
Mm-hmm.
But so often this kind of thing seems to come up when there's doubts about someone. I say, well, I'm going to set this up in a way so I can really test, and I'll find out if my concern is justified. Well, boy, it's pretty easy to prove that your concern is justified if you go in with that attitude. You can set it up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can set it up for success. And it could look exactly the same in detail, but there are messages getting communicated that make a huge difference in how it turns out.
Mm-hmm.
What other topics or thoughts come to people's minds?
Well, I'm just thinking this issue of trust is much richer than I had thought. Going in, it was a kind of a binary decision. You're either trustworthy or you're not. Next,
right?
And there are nuances here, and I hadn't taken care to think of. This is great to me.
Yeah, and I also try to take it out of the moral or righteous aspects of it.
Mm-hmm.
saying someone is trustworthy is just a compliment. It's a good person, of course. That person is trustworthy. But there are situations where people fall down in every one of those 5 categories. Sincerity is not perfect in anyone, as far as the research indicates. I forgot her name, but she's a researcher at UVA who made quite a name by tracking how many times a day people lie. Any guesses what the averages were like? Dozens
Really?
of times a day. And there was a big gender disparity. So let's take a quick poll. So which gender, Ron, do you think does more lying in the course of an average day? Men or women?
Well, yeah, my gut reaction is men, but that means the answer is probably women.
Are you lying to me?
Yes.
Doris, what do you think? I guess you did pop off earlier.
You're
back.
I've read this. Hold on one second. I've read this study, and unfortunately, I can't remember it. I think it's men, but I really don't know.
Hey, Todd?
At the risk of sounding sexist, I'm going to say women.
Of course.
and I'm thinking, Tony, because this is probably more like the little white lies, every kind of lie, not just, devious lies.
What do you mean by little white lies?
I love your dress. Your hair is wonderful. That kind of thing.
Well, you've got it on the nose, Todd.
Oh.
Women by a large margin, and their lies tend to be things that protect the other person's feelings. So women lie more because they're nicer than men.
I would agree with that. The nicer part.
I have a wonderful story that I enjoy about white lies. It's about Lillian Carter, Jimmy Carter's mother. She became quite a celebrity during the campaign. She was scheduled for an interview in her hotel room. A young female reporter came in to interview her, and as often happens, it started off all lightweight, sweet stuff. But then it quickly developed that this person was going for a scoop. Was going to cross-examine Miss Lillian. And she started saying, now your son has told us that if he ever lies to the American people, we shouldn't vote for him. Now, you know him better than anyone. Tell us, has your son ever lied? And Miss Lillian thought for a moment and says, well, I'm sure he's told some little white lies. The reporter said, aha, just what do you mean by a little white lie? She said, I'm not sure I can define it, but I'll give you an example. Do you remember when you walked in my room and I told you how pretty you looked and how glad I was to see you?
Ching.
And the problem is, I think that gets extended to the workplace and undermines sincerity, where people give the answer they feel they need to give. They commit to things that they don't understand. They say they'll do something because they want to help the other person, even when they know they don't have the capacity to help that person. Getting these things out where people can be truly sincere about them and discuss what it takes to get things done just sends productivity through the roof. It's astonishing how much faster things get done, more things get done, and to-do lists get shorter because people can actually say no. Not only do they have less to do, but the people who are depending on them to get that done don't go on down blind alleys and wild goose chases.
Mm. Mm.
Any other insights, thoughts, applications? Any commitments to action? Anything you're thinking of coming up on your calendars in the next day or two? You think you might be able to apply some of these things?
Well, being somewhat in the moment, I'm just hoping my power comes back on.
Oh, wow. It's been out since yesterday?
Yeah. It went out around the time you sent your first message being stuck on the 267 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I had quite an ordeal yesterday.
Oh, sounds awful.
Well, it was kind of fun. I mean, I knew the rest of my family was home and safe, although in the dark. And I never felt like I was in danger. I was inconvenienced, but I was never in danger as far as I could tell. So from there, I could just be flexible and enjoy it. Which, of course, has applications in a lot of places in the workplace, too. Often people feel threatened emotionally, so they can't just be creative. People spend a lot of time feeling like they're in a survival situation, although they're not. I mean, that's workplace stress. We have these great mechanisms to respond to physical threats, but we're using those hormones to respond to emotional concerns, and it literally eats away at us. But that's probably a topic for the next teleseminar. Well, I hope you get power soon. What are you using for heat?
Actually, we have the fireplace going, but it only throws so much heat. So
right.
we're kind of chilly.
Yeah, all the fireplace does is create a warm spot at the expense of cooling the rest of the house.
So we're hovering around the living room.
All right, well, last call before we wrap up early. Any other comments or topics anyone want to bring up?
No.
Well, I do appreciate you being here. If you found this of value, please forward your announcement email to your friends. Invite them to come on. I'm glad to have a larger group on here, and I'll continue to schedule these every couple of weeks. Just watch your email list.
Great. Thank you, Tony.
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. More information is available at tonymayo.com. We appreciate your comments, suggestions for future topics, and, most of all, stories of how you applied the coaching. Our email address is podcast@mayogenuine.com. This podcast is the property of top executive coach Tony Mayo, copyright 2011.